Welcome to another episode of Mindful City, Tuning into Life, a podcast to discover and celebrate the many ways that our city is using mindfulness in our practical daily lives. Welcome to another episode of Mindful City, Tuning into Life. Today, I am delighted to have with us Just James from Intermittent Fasting for Vegans.com. And I have virtually connected with James through the Intermittent Fasting for Vegans Facebook group. It's been a new journey for me into the world of intermittent fasting. I heard about so many of the benefits associated with this practice, and I needed a bit of a change in the way that I was doing my well-being in terms of eating and in terms of maintaining or losing weight. And so I joined this group, and the group in itself has been such an incredible support. But the wealth of information that I started to receive and see from Just James and also on the website, that all the research that you've done. And I think what has intrigued me is that James doesn't just answer the questions with just a random answer. He always has backup for that information. And I found that at this time in the world, that is such an important aspect, and he does it so well. And so I had to contact him to ask if he would come onto the show and just share with us a little bit about this incredible intermittent fasting and the research that he has done. So I would like to welcome you, James. Thank you for joining the show. And thank you. I'm not good at introductions because I feel that you can share from yourself. You're the best way. But I was just curious a little bit if you could tell us your personal journey and how you even came to intermittent fasting.
Well, that's a long journey. I'll give you the cliff notes of it though. So about, oh my gosh, 35 years ago, I went to Sally's beauty supply with my girlfriend, and I grabbed up a bottle of V Conditioner by Paul Mitchell, and I looked at it and had a little rabbit on it. It said, "We never test on animals," and I was like, "Why do I care if they put conditioner on the animal's hair?" You know. And my girlfriend at the time said, "No, dummy, they stick the chemicals in their eyes to make sure it doesn't hurt them." And I was like, "Oh no." So I started researching that a little bit, and I found a website called, or not a website at the time, but I found PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And I wanted to look into veganism, or not veganism at that time, vegetarianism. So I learned a lot about that. And I actually ended up looking for vegetarian restaurants. And I stumbled upon a restaurant called Govinda's vegetarian restaurant in St. Louis, Missouri, about 22 minutes away from my house. And oh my gosh, I loved the food and stuff like that. And I didn't realize it was in a temple, and it was a Hare Krishna temple. And I went there, and I went there just to eat the food. But then I started hanging out with some of the people, and I like, these guys are so cool. I just love them, you know. And that started like a 16-year journey, you know, in the temple, talking to the folks, actually doing a lot of studying, and meeting a lot of interesting people. And you know, I waxed and waned between that. Vegetarianism, and then finding more out about dairy and stuff like that, and then finally got into veganism. Well, I think one of the things when you become a kind of overnight vegan is that you want to make your vegetables look as close to what you used to eat. So a lot of people, bean burgers and all this stuff. So I became what I call it a junk food vegan.
Yes.
So I blew up to people think that vegans are skinny and healthy, and that's just not the truth. Uh, Vegans' main premise is to as far as possible do no harm or as little as you can.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean you're not going to just eat Diet Coke and fries, because that's technically a vegan. So yeah, I blew up and I was 205 pounds, which does not look good on my 5'10" body. And I was getting ready to start a new job, and then I just was on a Facebook search, and I typed in vegan dieting, and intermittent fasting popped up, and I was like, oh, that's interesting because when I was running around with the Hare Krishnas, they do fasting. There's certain days that you can't eat certain things, and there's certain days that you have to fast all day, and there's certain days that you have to fast for a certain amount of time. Like all religions, or a lot of religions, there's a fasting component in doing that. So I found the Facebook group called Intermittent Fasting for Vegans, and I joined it, and it was run by a couple of nice ladies out of Scotland, and they did an intermittent fasting type that's called a 5-2, and we can get into that later. But I started it. I chose a window that was called a 20/4, meaning you fast for 20 hours, drinking water only, and then you squeeze the food that you eat into a 4 hour period. Well, I went from 205 pounds to 160 pounds in 2.5 months. Uh, but I felt like crap. I didn't feel any better than I felt when I was overweight. So I was watching a couple of documentaries. One, I watched Cowspiracy, which really solidified becoming a vegan, if no other reason than the environment. And then I watched the follow up to that called What the Health, and then that really drilled into a plant based diet. So I started eating just whole plant foods, and that's when I believe for me that's when my journey began. My journey didn't be there. My journey didn't end at the weight
Weight
loss.
loss.
My journey began at learning more about whole plant foods. So
That's
that.
kind of where my journey is now, right? So it's I started with the weight loss journey. I lost about 35 pounds. And
Nice.
then now I'm like, okay, it's time to really take a look at what I am eating and when I am eating and how it's impacting, my body. And that I was at that phase where I realized I've heard some about intermittent fasting through Ayurveda, and so I knew that there were definitely benefits to it, but I
Mm.
wasn't quite sure how I was going to go about implementing this in my life, and especially with the kind of hours that I've been working. So I kind of put it aside, thinking it isn't something for me. But when I joined your group, I just my eyes opened, and it's just been so supportive, and I'm learning so much. And I really wanted to have you on to just for anybody that it's just for informational purpose, educational purpose. But if someone was interested in doing it, but it seemed so far reaching, I thought maybe we could break it down a little bit and make it a little more something that everybody can do or begin to do. So perhaps you could start us off a little bit with what is intermittent fasting.
Well, okay, so intermittent fasting, and I like the way you said that because any type of a diet, if you call it, or a lifestyle change that you call it, it has to be palatable. It can't be something that you have to work for. It has to work for you, because if you're working for something, it's not gonna benefit you. You have to make it work for you and around your schedule and needs. So what intermittent fasting is, and some people like to call it time restricted eating,
Hmm.
is where you take everything that you're eating right now, don't change any of that, and just push it into a window. And what I like to tell new folks, the first thing that comes out of my mouth is, "Hey, I don't give recommendations. You know, I'm just a guy that stumbled onto this, and I did a lot of research, hours and hours. I think I put more into this than I did my dissertation. Uh, I
Okay.
I uh, I put a lot of hours of research in it, and you've got to make it work for you. But if I were to be one to make recommendations, I would say start out with like a 12-12. That's really not a big intermittent fasting window, because that would mean that you fast for 12 hours, drinking water only, or hopefully sleeping 8 of those, and then the next 12 hours you put in the foods that you would normally eat. I like that as a starter because it gets you used to a window,
And
and
eight
we call
hours of
them,
it you're sleeping, so that helps too.
let's hope 8 hours. I hope everybody's getting 8 hours of sleep. I, I feel lucky for myself if I get six, but
Yeah.
yeah, 8 hours of sleep would be nice. Um, we call it the feeding window. Um, During that, you eat the foods that you normally eat. And I tell folks, maybe try that out for a month, get used to the window and see how you like it. And if you see no results, well, that's typical, because not a whole lot has changed. And then I say, maybe add an hour of fasting every week until you start seeing results. And that's where the coolness comes in, because then, when you get down to a 16-8, where you're actually fasting for 16 hours and moving still the same foods that you eat all the time into an 8-hour window, uh, then you could start seeing some results. Try that for a month. If that's not working, maybe try an 18-6 and move your feeding into an 18-hour window. And then that's when I tell people, if you don't see results in an 18 hours of fasting and a 6-hour feeding window, then that's when we need to talk. Because I
Yeah.
said that's when you need to take a look at what it is you're eating. So
Hmm.
if you're eating high octane crap, then I always say, what would happen if you cut that in half, had half your vegan junk food and then half just whole fresh fruits, and vegetables. Um, Raw, as I always say, try to get as close to the tree as you possibly can. So raw
Exactly.
as possible, cut out some of the processed, and then I think that kick starts people. They because everyone thinks that vegan food has to be boring, and I've never tasted better food than since I've been a
It's
vegan,
true.
and
Yeah. You
particularly
just taste more flavors. There's so much more that you can do with it and mixing it. And you start to notice more the flavors in the foods that you do have. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. When I became a vegetarian and eventually vegan, I thought that my mother would, God rest her soul, disown me, because like you were not brought up that way, and I was like, well, if you think about it, when people consume meat, there's probably people can say that typically there's about 5 different types of meat that you eat. Well, you don't usually just eat that alone. What do you eat with it? Well, there's a couple of
Exactly.
vegetables. You might have a salad. Okay, there you go. So let's have more of that and less or none of meat.
I want to swing back to something before we get deeper into the feeding window. What is actually the premise of the intermittent fasting? Like what, why? Because we're going and I can see we're doing windows, okay, 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours. What's the main reason that we're doing that? What happens in the body that that brings that benefit of fasting?
Well, so when you stop eating, your body gets to take a nice rest. And since you're not digesting food, your body's at rest, it's calm, and it gets to do some repairs to itself. It's like taking a break, at work. You get to relax for a little bit and reset. And with um, fasting, and intermittent fasting, what happens is when you take your last bite of food, you've got about, some say 2 to 4, some science shows 6 hours left of digestion. And when that's done, that's when magic starts, because your brain says, hey, because we're used to, 3 meals a day and 2 snacks in between. So when you eat like that, you always have insulin in your body. Insulin is a hormone that's secreted to help it holds the key to unlock the cells and let the glucose go in there and be stored.
Mhm.
It's stored in the liver, it's stored in the other cells, and it's stored as glucose or as fat. Now, when you're fasting, at some point, your body says, hey, guy, I'd really like some energy. So the the liver says, well, hey, I've got all this glucose stored in here. Here, have some of that. So then the body starts burning that off, and it's like, you know what, I really need more. And it's like, you know what, all I got left is fat. Will you take that? And the body's like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, why not? Let's burn some fat. So the longer you fast, the more fat you're burning. That's why there's so many different windows. Because if you do 16 by 8, we can break it down. So at 6 hours ish, you're done digesting all your food. After that, then your body has to rely on stored glucose and stored fat to start burning. At about 12 hours, your growth hormone skyrockets. And when that does, there's a lot of repair going on to your tissues. um, 13 hours, autophagy kicks in, and I'll explain that in a moment. And then 16 hours, and then about, yeah, 14 hours, you start burning fat, and then you continue to burn fat because there's no more glucose. And most importantly, there's no insulin running around in your bloodstream. Because when insulin is running around in your bloodstream, fat cannot be burned because insulin is there to assimilate the glucose and use that for energy. So that's one of the main hormones in uh, fasting or intermittent fasting. Once you shut the insulin down, then you start burning other alternate fuels. You burn off what's left of the glucose, and then you start fat burning. So that kicks up, and at about between 16 and 18 hours, your body is saying, hey, you got to feed me, brother, give me something. It's like, well, hey, I've got all this stored white fat, let's get rid of that. And you start burning that for fuel, and then at about 18 hours, it it starts doubling, and it gets exponentially more burning after that, and it will continue to do that burn until you eat again and the insulin is secreted.
So it seems, based on what you're sharing, then at any window of doing fasting, there's already begins to be benefit. But as you increase that fasting window, there's just additional layers of benefit that the body can then use to, like you're saying. Oh, and we were going to talk about the what was it, autophagy? Autophagy. What
Oh,
is it?
okay. Yeah. So autophagy is, I always like to tell a story. So autophagy, let's say every cell in your body. So every cell in your body has all of these working components into it, but it also has garbage in there that hasn't been taken out. So when you continue to put food in your body, um, and you're in that office, it's busy and nobody takes out the trash. And then so here's what I like to say. Imagine you're in an office and there's four workers in there, and three of the workers are they're really super hard workers. And the other one is just lazy. It's not doing anything. All it wants to do is take breaks. And the other three workers are like, I'm hungry. Why don't we eat that? And so we'll eat that, and then we'll become nice and stronger. The three of us can do the job that four of us should have been doing, but that other one's just not helping out. And then you have the autophagosome, and that is kind of like the garbage man, and that comes along go in the cell, and it's like, hey, what's this? Oh, that's just a bunch of trash. Take that out. So autophagy is how it's our body's process of repairing itself, making itself new, and it can occur for a couple of things. If you injure yourself, you're going to have autophagy because that's your body calling up all its defenses. It's like, oh, there's an injury here. Let's go fix that. I don't recommend hitting your pinky with a hammer to get into autophagy. Another one is exercise, because the body sees exercise as you injuring itself, and then it wants to repair those muscles and stuff that you've injured. And those are all on a very small scale compared to fasting. When you fast, your body is like, dude, you've got to give me something. And an autophagy kicks in at about 14 to 16 hours, and on a mass level. That's all the cells coming together and saying, we need some energy. Here, why don't we just eat this, put it into the dump truck and get it out of here. When it's gone, we've got a lot more energy and still, haven't eaten yet.
Mm-hmm.
So autophagy is just basically a way of repairing the cell.
So when the body is going through the processes as you were sharing within the 12, 14, 16, 18 hours, the different layers that you were just sharing with us, how does the body then tell us this information? Because one of the things that I've noticed a lot people asking is, when you're hungry, at least, for me, I've had to deal a little bit with insulin resistance. So, there's this feeling like you're going to faint. And when I had this feeling that you're going to faint, even though I didn't really want to eat, sometimes, you got to put something in, or headaches or something like that. Is this the body's response system? And like, how do we work with that?
Yeah, well, what happens is, and I've got a video on like headaches with fasting, and what happens is the body wants to punish you. There's a hormone called the ghrelin hormone, and ghrelin is your hunger hormone, and it is what says, hey, wait a second, I'm used to you feeding me a lot more. Let's make you hungry. And that's when you get your stomach growling and stuff like that. And leptin is the satiety hormone. That's the hormone that when you eat, leptin actually comes out and says, hey, I'm full. That's enough. Stop. And and with insulin and insulin resistance, insulin becomes resistant because we have this SAD, the standard American diet, and we cause the insulin resistance by just the things that we're feeding it. So the after you've had a poor diet for so long, the insulin doesn't work the same way that it did when you were younger, or when you eat a healthy diet. So when you get hungry, a lot of times there's a couple of things going on. One is you're actually thirsty. You're dehydrated. You need some water. And another one is your blood glucose might be tanking, and that's that's part of the process because, related again to the insulin resistance. If it's something that's making you feel poorly, that's when I say, well, that might be a good reason to go ahead and break your fast and try for another day. Because I like to say every hour you add to every minute, every hour that you add to fasting and do it healthfully is a win because your
Mhm.
body will set to that, just like our bodies are used to eating 3 meals a day and two snacks a day. Also, your body will get used to eating those things in a particular window.
I remember recently someone asked a question in the group in terms of what they can have during their fasting time.
Uh,
And I know that's like a constant discussion,
yeah.
obviously, but I know that listeners are probably having some of the same questions. To me, it was, you said water and that's all. I was like, okay, you said water, that's water. I'm fasting. But could you give some ideas about the reasoning behind why you would say certain things would not be conducive to fasting because it wouldn't mean you're fasting at all, and some instances where you have to take certain things that people take, vitamins and things of that nature? What are your thoughts on those? This is just during the fasting window.
Well, yeah, the what can I have while I'm fasting is just the bane of my existence because fasting is the absence of food, and fasting historically has been either with water or with nothing at all. During Ramadan, they dry fast, for a period of time and then eat and drink after that. But the reason why a water only fasting is the purest form of fasting is um, anything that you put in your body that's not water has the tendency to break a fast. Now, some things I'll say, okay, that will interrupt your fast, but it might not break it. So let's go with the most popular. Can I
Coffee.
can I can I have coffee while I fast? Okay, so here's the problem with coffee. Coffee, well, other than that, it's just not the best thing for our bodies. Um, Related to some research, I drink coffee. I love coffee. I'll have it once in a while, but I always have it during my feeding window. And the reason is the coffee bitters. And the what happens is that the body will see that um, as an invader. The liver will actually see coffee bitters and other elements in the coffee, and it has oils in it and stuff like that. It will see it as a toxin. So the liver needs to rid the body of toxin, and it's not real bright. It just knows it's like this bouncer, and it says, "Hey, there's a bad guy in the bar, so let me grab him around the neck and throw him out of there." Well, if you're busying the liver up with anything, then you're not getting the full benefit of your fast. And the same thing. So I'll tell people, yeah, okay, if you've got to have coffee. Make sure you don't put anything in it, and you'll interrupt your fast. You might not break it. Same thing with tea. Green tea, black tea, white tea, red tea, those types of things. Those are going to interrupt your fast because the liver will see it as a problem that it needs to fix. So you won't be getting the purity of a true water fast. Now, when you get outside of that, if you say, well, can I have chamomile tea? Can I have herbal teas? Can I have this? Can I have that? Now, that's a different story. Herbal teas are going to break your fast. And here's why. Herbal tea is not tea. Herbal tea is dried flowers and it's dried fruits and it's stuff like that. Well, when you add water to something that's dry, it expands and it kind of starts secreting out of it whatever was in it to begin with. So the 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 body is going to see that the vagus nerve is going to be stimulated. It's going to say, "Oh, hey, I need some insulin to take care of that." As soon as the pancreas starts secreting insulin to help out with what we call the digestive process, that's when you're going to break that fast.
Mm.
Um, Artificial sweeteners. People talk about, oh, well, can I sweeten it with stevia or this? Or I heard I can, sweeten it with that. And like, yeah, you can, but you're not fasting because the vagus nerve, it doesn't register sweet as in sugar or sweet as in
Stevia, right? Like
eating a
something else.
day. What
Mhm.
it does is it measures sweetness. So sweetness hits the tongue, and the vagus nerve thinks, "Oh, you just put sugar in me. Here, let me get some insulin for you." So artificial sweeteners, other than being horrible for you, will definitely break your fast.
What about the toothpaste then? Because a lot of these toothpaste have stuff in it.
They
Which,
do, and my standard answer is, yeah, that's probably going to interrupt your fast. If I'm in my fasting window, I use a mixture of baking soda, a little bit of hydrogen peroxide, and a little bit of water, and
okay, yeah.
that usually doesn't. If it does anything, it'll be an interruption. But if not, it's not going to completely break your fast. But when people ask me that question, my standard answer is, your friends called. They said they want you to brush your teeth. So yeah,
So, yeah,
take your
it might not
chance.
benefit you, but it will benefit others if you.
Yeah, I I I use for me, and like I said again, I don't make recommendations, but what I do for me is I use a 50-50 hydrogen peroxide, the 3% kind, as kind of like a mouthwash and a tongue scraper. That's really a good way to do it. But another thing that particularly intermittent fasters that do it for a longer term need to understand is that if you feel like your breath is bad, a lot of times it's not uh, related to your mouth being dirty. It's your
Mhm.
like ketosis, or you're doing some body processing and stuff like that.
Right.
And in
So,
COVID right now,
oh
it's
yeah.
it's perfect. You get to wear a mask, and
Yeah. And they should keep 6 foot distance
and
so
you
they
get
can
six
smell
foot
your breath.
difference. So if somebody says, "Hey, your breath stinks," you're like, "Hey, you know
Yeah, you
what?
must be
You're too
too
close to
close.
me. You're too close to me."
I agree. So, thank you for spending that time with us into the fasting window. I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about the feeding window because I think when we're putting all this effort already in giving our body the time it needs to rest, to repair, to regenerate, to detox, then I would think now we want to be as as diligent with what we start feeding with or what we start breaking the fast with. Um, what would you say to begin to get us into that direction from your experience?
Well, first of all, I think you might be surprised about how many people don't. people, a lot of folks want to hear great things about their bad habits, and yeah, and people will tell you, "Hey, I ate straight crap and I lost 45 pounds," and it's like, "Oh, okay, right. Well, what's your blood levels? I'd love to see your triglycerides and your cholesterol. I'd love to take a look at your biomarkers and see how well you actually think you're doing." But when you're, you know, anybody that thinks in their mind, "Hey, I would like to lose weight," I think that they're saying to themselves, other than, "Hey, I would like to look better," is, "Hey, I
Feel
would like to
better.
be healthier. I
Mm-hmm.
want to feel better." So during your feeding window, if you want to get the maximum benefit of this new lifestyle, for me, I would say try to do a whole plant food diet. Um, I know that the buzzword is there. I'm whole food plant based. Well, I like to drop the based off of it because a lot of advertisers and a lot of folks, they take that as that I mostly eat plants, but I can have a little cheese on the side and I can have a little meat on the side. But I'm
Mm-hmm.
based in plants. So I threw the based off. I just say I'm a whole plant food eater. So
Mhm.
if you're fasting, I like to break my fast with a fibrous fruit. My favorite is watermelon.
Watermelon.
Everybody knows that. Everybody knows James eats watermelon because it's wet, it's fibrous, and it gets the body ready. It's a good transition from fasting into feeding. But any fruit really can help with that. Um, and then I wait 20 minutes. And then what I like to do is follow the Daily Dozen. Dr. Greger runs nutritionfacts.org, and he has what's called the Daily Dozen, and you can go to your app store and you can type in Daily Dozen, and the app will come up. It's actually, and I get nothing for saying this. It's a free app. There's no ads. There's no spam. He actually created the whole site in dedication to his grandmother who was on death's bed because of horrible heart disease at about 64, I think she was. And they found out about a guy named Nathan Pritiket who pioneered some plant-based dieting. She went to his center, started eating whole plant foods, and she lived until she was 94. So
Wow.
like Dr. Greger says, if there was one thing that you could do that could arrest, and not only arrest, but arrest and reverse health problems such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, arterial sclerosis, atherosclerosis, all of these horrible food related, lifestyle related diseases that we have, and not have to take a pill to do it, why wouldn't that be the default diet? So I break my fast with watermelon and I eat the Daily Dozen. And what does that consist of? I'm going to try to do this off the top of my head because I don't have it in front of me. But in the Daily Dozen, you eat beans, legumes. That's going to be a main source of protein and fiber, particularly, because everybody used to say, well, where do you get your protein? I've had so many people say that to me being a vegan. Where do you get your protein? It's like, look, don't worry about protein. Worry about fiber. Fiber is the thing that's going to save you. Protein, we get enough protein. So beans is one of them. He recommends having a half a cup of beans 3 times a day. So that's 1.5 cups of beans. Well, if you're here in America and you look at a can of beans, it's 1.5 cups of beans plus about an eighth of another cup. So I eat a can of beans a day. I'm not going to throw away, um, so, and then also then the next thing is grains. And that again is 1.5 cups of grains. Now that could be any type of whole grain type of a food product. So I like organic brown rice.
Mhm.
And I like quinoa. I eat almost everything organic. Quinoa, freekeh, bulgur, any of the grains that you can think of. 1.5 cups of that a day. Or one slice of whole grain bread is the equivalent of a zero point 0.5, a half cup of grains.
Grains. Okay.
Then you need to eat at least a half a cup of cruciferous vegetables. And that is your cauliflowers, broccolis, kales,
Kale.
arugula, stuff like
Mhm.
that. And then make me spin back to that and let you know why on the cruciferous vegetables. Then you need to have a 2 other cups of a leafy green vegetable, and that is any of your lettuces. And the cool part about that is if you decide to have a salad of kale or arugula or mix those, not only are you getting your leafy, but you're also getting your cruciferous. So
Mhm.
sometimes I'll just have 3 cups, of
Kind
kale.
of mixed greens. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then you need to have at least 2 cups of non-leafy vegetables. My favorites are onions, tomatoes, peppers, and carrots. That's usually, you'll see all of those in my salad. And that's just a quarter cup of onions, a quarter cup of colored peppers, green, red, yellow, stuff like that. I like the mini sweet peppers because I get it all in one. And then tomatoes, that's a quarter cup of tomatoes, and then a quarter cup of carrots. He recommends a quarter cup of nuts or seeds. And new evidence shows that we need to be having those raw because of advanced glycation end products. That's another thing you can have me spin back to if we have time. If we have time, or you have the inclination, yeah. So half a cup of nuts and seeds. They need to be raw, and that reason is because you need to have some healthy fats. You need to have a good omega 3
Three.
versus omega 3 versus your omega 6 ratio. You have a ratio of 1 to 3 on those. At least 1 part 3s to 3 parts of an omega 6. He recommends having a quarter teaspoon of turmeric every day with a quarter teaspoon of black pepper. And the turmeric is because it's an amazing anti-inflammatory, and inflammation in our bodies is a killer, and anything we can do to bring that down. And the reason it's only a quarter of a teaspoon is because that's just what the studies show. He bases all of his recommendations on science.
I actually did download his app the other
Yeah.
day when I saw from what, and there's also like videos and explanation of that. And but as you're going through this, I'm just thinking of so much is available during the feeding window. I mean,
Oh,
it's not, because you would think, because you're hearing fasting, so almost your mind tells you you're not going to eat much food. But as you're going through something, this is an incredible amount and variety of food that's accessible and available
yeah.
during the feeding window.
When I put diet plans together, and they're vegan diet plans, people will look at it and they're like, James, there's no way I'm gonna eat all of that in one day. And I'm like, well, I'm telling you, that's what's available. That's the glory of it, is that is what you can have. I'm not telling you that you have to eat it all, but I do think it's important to eat enough. If you eat 2,000 calories a day and you want to go to intermittent fasting, you need to get as close to that as you want, because your body weight is set at a certain basal metabolic rate. If it's used to burning 2,000 calories a day, and you say, well, I'll just cut out 500 calories and I'll eat 1,500 calories a day. Well, if you're in a coal plant and you're burning 2,000 pieces of coal a day to power a city, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, I'm going to only burn 1,500 pieces of coal a day. Well, what happens to that city? Some of the lights are going to go out because you're not burning the same. So it's going to slow down. So as you bring down your calories, also comes down your basal metabolic rate, so that it can match what the energy is coming in. So people think that the whole calories in, calories out thing is long ago debunked. I think it's been 100 years that they said, oh yeah, we were wrong, because it doesn't, the physicists say, energy cannot be created nor destroyed. And they're saying, the calories in, calories out, the first rule of thermodynamics, but that's great for physics, and that's great for a static system. The body's not a static system. This part of your body is using this amount of energy, while this part of your body is not using that amount of energy. And for crying out loud, a cup of 100 calories of broccoli is not the same as 100 calories of brownies. Absolutely not. It stores the same. It stores differently. It burns differently. So I like people to get the calorie thought
Out of
out of
there.
their mind. Yeah.
That's important. We've gone through so much information, and as I was saying to you before we even started, I just hope, and I would love to have you on the show in the future because I think there's so much more that we can get into, and I'll probably get some more feedback and questions, and we can be more direct in answering those.
Yeah.
But before we close, I did want to ask you because you encounter a lot of people that are going on this journey of intermittent fasting, and you see some of the challenges, but you've also seen the victories. So, what would you say to anyone that has listened today and is considering that? What words would you give them if they're going on this journey?
If you want to start intermittent fasting, I think my biggest piece of advice is to not do it how I did it. I went straight to a 20 by 4. It was rough to get through. I'm a kind of a determined person, but it was a rough go. So what I try to tell new folks is take it easy because people join the Facebook group and they come in and they're like, "Hey, I'm gonna go do an OMAD, which means one meal a day." And I said, "Yeah, well, you're gonna, that you're setting yourself up for failure." So I say go low and slow.
Mm-hmm.
Start off with 12 hours. You might not see weight loss. You might, but you probably aren't because it's probably something really close to what you're doing. A 12-hour window is something to get you disciplined to eating in a certain time period. And then slow it down. Maybe add an hour to your fast once a week. So next week do a 13-hour fast and eat for the rest of the time. The next week do a 14-hour fast. And it doesn't even have the next week. Maybe the next month. But I think that a lot of times, um, uh, including myself, when we see that we've gained a few pounds, we want to get rid of it right now. I've had people come onto the site and say, "Hey, I'm going to go ahead and do a 72-hour fast." And I'm going, "Well, you've lost your mind. So stop right there. Stop with that thinking. Work your way up." So um, I would say go low, go slow. And number one, be gentle with yourself. This is not, you're not sprinting a quarter of a mile here. This is a lifestyle change, and it's going to take time, as all good things do. I've had some members on the site that have said, "Hey, I've been doing 16-8 for 6 weeks and I haven't lost a pound." And my immediate question to them is, "How does your honesty pants fit?" Because we've all got that pair of pants that we used to be able to fit in that are in our closet that we just haven't got rid of because one day we're going to fit in those again. They're going to be out of style, but one day we're going to fit in those again. They say, "Go try on those honesty pants. Try on a belt and see if it comes down a loop. Get your tape measure up. Don't rely on the scale because there's so many non-scale victories out there, gone down a size, stuff like that." So, yeah,
Absolutely.
I would say the most important thing is to approach it at a slower pace. Be very gentle with yourself. If you say, "Oh my God, I failed today. I was so hungry and I ate a chip." And it's like, you didn't fail. There's not a failure. That's an opportunity for you. You learned from that. Now, when you feel hungry and you want that chip, move it out an hour. Just say, "Okay, chip, I'm going to have you, but I'm going to wait one more hour."
Exactly.
Celebrate your victories. Don't celebrate your, don't put yourself down for failures because I don't see anything as a failure. I see those things as opportunities to improve.
Well, James, thank you so much. And, just a personal thank you because I've also benefited from joining the Facebook group, the Intermittent Fasting for Vegans website, and all the research that you've done and the incredible information that you've put out there, making it available to us, and that the time that you take to answer questions and in the Facebook group. And so, again, thanks for so much incredible information And I'm looking forward to see, people's journey, and I can't wait to hear about their journey, and to have you back on the show again soon.
Absolutely. Bring your friends. We'll put out a spread.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good one. Talk to you soon.
Good talking to you.
To find out more about Just James and intermittent fasting, visit intermittentfastingforvegans.com or find the same on YouTube and Facebook.